One of the critical outcomes adopted by the OBE states that learners should be able to work together in a team, group, organisation or community. To develop social and academic skills, group work is an important tool in the classroom. Today we're taking a closer look at group work. Group work has some advantages and some challenges too.
Good morning, class.
Good morning, Mrs. Kerr.
Very good to see you this morning. We're going to be looking at herbivores, omnivores and carnivores, and we're going to be exploring this in groups. What groups of animals did I just mention? Grant?
Omnivores, carnivores and herbivores.
Very good, Grant. I've divided my learners into groups so that they can do a natural science lesson. They're going to be looking through magazines for pictures of omnivores, herbivores and carnivores and sorting them and categorizing them into those different groupings. For some activities, classwork works very well. And for other activities, group work is probably a better option. So I think you need to see what are your needs, what are your needs of your learners, what is it that you're wanting to teach, and then decide whether a class approach or a group work approach is going to be the most effective way of getting learning to happen in your classroom.
Why did you want them to work in groups?
Well, grouping has a lot of valuable attributes for it, not the least of which is that they learn to get on with each other. Teamwork and learning to work together is a very important part of growing up and forms a vital part of the business world as well. It also helps when we've got limited resources for these kids to work in small groups. So we need somebody in the group who's good with time, just to make sure that everybody is actually working and that you're not going to run out of time for your activity. So what I would like you to do now is discuss amongst yourselves who you would like as a watch keeper.
Tell us why you assigned different roles to each of the learners.
Well, there's so many roles that children can take on, from being a group leader and taking responsibility to being a timekeeper or a scribe. We have people who are harmonizers. We have people who are listeners. The listeners and the harmonizers are there to make sure that everybody in the group gets a chance. They're meant to work out when somebody is feeling left out and then try and steer the group to including them. Sometimes we have people who take responsibility for certain jobs in the group, like tidying up or looking after equipment. If I rotate those roles, it gives everybody the chance to experience being a scribe or a presenter. It also makes sure that nobody's left out. Sometimes I capitalize on a child's strength. There are children that are very good, for example, at keeping time, or have a good way of keeping other children under control without hurting any feelings. Scribes, I need you to write in beautiful big letters at the top of each page these words. You can write nice and big in the cokies. Okay, scribes, if you want to choose somebody to help you, one of these, so for example, you'll have herbivores at the top of one page, omnivores at the top of a different page, and carnivores on another page. Right, scribes, would you like to get busy with that? Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand out some magazines. Remember your roles, remember how to work in a group, that you need to work together as a team, and I want you to start looking for animals that you can cut out and stick on these different pages to show herbivores, omnivores, and carnivores. We'll look at what's on the front so that we can get them later. So we can come back and look. So, okay. Right. Yes? You forgot?
Oh, look at that, that's beautiful.
Oh dear. Carnivore or herbivore?
Herbivore.
Herbivore, because it eats grass and things like that.
Did you group the children or did they group themselves?
For the science activity, they actually were grouped by me. They were sitting in mixed ability groups because then the stronger children can help the weaker children, and also because it gives them a range of experience to draw from.
In what other ways could you have grouped your children?
Sometimes I use friendship groups. They love to play games and do practical activities in friendship groups. Other times I may use homogeneous grouping, where I use the ability of the child to gauge which group they would be put into. For example, if I'm doing an extension activity, I want all the brighter children together, and while they're busy working at something that extends them, I'm then able to get a chance to work with a weaker group and do some remediation and fix up little problems without those children feeling bad that they're getting special attention. Okay, class, focus on me. Thank you. Gary, this group, you need to focus on me. My watch keepers, I want you just to watch the time. You've got 5 more minutes for your cutting and sticking. Okay, so watch keepers, keep an eye on the time and make sure that people are sticking already. Thank you. That's okay. Yes? Cooperation and sharing.
As a teacher, what is your role when learners work in groups?
I think that it's very much that of a facilitator, to watch and monitor and see that learning is occurring and to intervene if I see things are going off track. It's also a good idea to find children doing things right and praise them and show examples of what they're doing right so that the other children know what the expectation is. Sometimes I have to intervene at a social level just to make sure that the members of the group are all getting on with each other and everyone's getting a chance to participate.
Dr. Lynn Tates is a lecturer at the University of Witwatersrand School of Education. She's completed a study on how children learn cooperatively. We're here to ask a couple of questions on group work. Dr. Tates, can you comment on the advantages of group work?
First of all, in the OBE, in the critical outcomes, it states that learners need to learn to work together. Group work would provide opportunities for learners to participate, all learners to participate, so that you don't just have 2 or 3 children in a classroom answering, but everybody would be able to talk and they would learn to get to know one another.
For EMS today, we're going to be playing a game. Please open your books where it says Fred the Fruit Farmer. First of all, we need to get our desks organized into groups of 6. There've got to be 6 people at a desk, but you're allowed to go and sit with your friends. This is what you need to take with you: your space case and your EMS book. Okay, off you go. No, not your chair bag.
Can you comment as well on the advantages and disadvantages of grouping according to ability as opposed to friendship groups?
There is a place for both. Ability grouping is very useful in learning areas like maths and language, where learners have got some very definite concepts they have to work with. But there are occasions in all learning areas where learners really need to work in mixed ability groups. I'm not talking about friendship groups, but mixed groups. And friendship groups teachers must use when they feel that learners need to have some fun, when they play games, for example. But it isn't a very good way of grouping, because that's when things get out of hand very quickly.
What size group works best?
When learners first start working with group work, they really shouldn't work in more than 2s, in pairs. And as time goes by, that can be increased to 4 and possibly 6, but no more than that, because they can't retain all the information. They can't remember it. And then you start getting disruptions in your classroom.
Mrs. Kerr, the children are working in groups of 6. Do you always have groups of this size?
No, not at all. Sometimes I can work in groups much smaller than that. For example, I can let the children work in pairs, and sometimes I actually can work in groups bigger than that. But I tend not to like groups to be bigger than 8 because they get noisy and somebody ends up left out. But 6 or 5 is actually quite a comfortable number for a grade 4 classroom.
Do your learners ever sit in a circle?
They usually do, because that way they're facing each other. Every now and again it might not be practical, but we want to encourage interaction amongst the children, which is why we do group work and why we like them to face each other, because then they can literally talk to each other and they can read each other's body language.
Can you give us the criteria for effective group work?
The most important point is that teachers must be in full control of what goes on in the classroom. That means they must decide who will be in each group, how many will be in each group, what tasks the learners will do, and how long it will take them. Timing is very important. Then there must be space for learner feedback. There are many others as well, but those are the most important criteria.
In a nutshell, effective group work management technique requires a sense of courage and fairness from the teacher. This is an interesting subject indeed. Let's hear how Mrs. Kerr handles group work in her class.
I think one of the most important things is to be well organized and to have a feeling of discipline through the classroom that's there consistently, because otherwise they can get out of hand, and it's not been unknown for little fights or arguments to break out. I also think that if you're going to use group work as a technique in your classroom, you need to be actively involved. You need to walk around, move from group to group and see what the children are doing, assist them with problems and see if there's anything that you can add to the group, perhaps even mediate at a social level and make sure a fight hasn't broken out or that someone is not being ignored. Then I would say make sure that your children know exactly what you expect of them, that they've got clarity as to what the task entails. What must they do? What must they learn? What must they hand in? How are they being assessed? And what are the assessment standards that you're looking at? With that kind of transparency and organization, I think that teachers can do group work. In fact, I think it's probably easier to teach a really big class like that than to try and keep control of all 50 of them at once. Sometimes I number seats so that I can divide children into groups or activities. For example, I'll say all number one's over there and they've got a particular activity to do. But it's also so that I can get answers from children without children feeling picked on. I might say, for example, I'd like all the number fours to answer this question. Maybe I want to know what an omnivore is. It gives all the number fours a chance to think about the answer they'd like to give, and then they don't feel that they're being picked on.
From the answers Mrs. Kerr has given us, we can see that group work is not an easy escape route for a lazy or weak learner. Some people think that certain members of the group can get away with doing nothing. But something that puzzles people, how do you assess an individual when they are doing group work? Do they all get the same mark?
Sometimes, depending on the activity, then I'm happy to give the group an assessment. Sometimes I actually let the group assess themselves, and let me tell you, they are very honest with each other and with their mark, and then they give me back the mark that they think they deserve. Other times, depending on the activity, I will be looking at children working in a group but to produce something that I'm going to assess on an individual basis. For example, these masks. As part of arts and culture, I do need to assess them and meet an assessment standard. Now, these masks were all made in a group, but I can assess the individual product. I can also assess how the group worked together, and that can be quite interesting sometimes.
Did you use group work before as a teacher?
I have actually always done group teaching, I think primarily because I was originally trained as a junior primary teacher. So although I've been teaching for many years, group work is something that I've always done because it just makes my teaching more effective, and they absolutely love it, as you can hear from the noise and the bubble. It also helps because they explain to each other and help each other far better than a teacher ever could certain concepts and things that they're learning about, and they add their own experience to the whole learning experience. Yeah, well, look at what's on the front.
Any advice or encouragement to teachers who want to use group work?
I think it's absolutely worth the effort to at least try it, and I think that being well prepared and being a little bit creative and a little bit more flexible will allow group work to happen in your classroom. You cannot expect silence and regimented children in group work. You have to allow for noise and for individuality and for little social occurrences to occur and for things to go wrong. Just be prepared for it and give it a try. It's worth it.
Groups like friendship groups are great for fun and practical activities. At times, depending on what the teacher wants to achieve, maybe maths and reading can be done in ability groups. Never, however, refer to the top or bottom group. Maybe give the bottom group a reader, then give the top group the reader as homework. The bottom group will feel proud that they've already had the book. Sometimes, for like practical